Turn the TV down, yeah. You know I don't know if I've ever known, yeah. Alright. You spend your time with the boys downtown, yeah. You act a fool. You act a clown, yeah. Let's go. You got the time, my baby. You took it on a sharp fuse. Don't waste my time. Hey, you bad news, yeah. The time, my baby. You took it on a sharp fuse. Don't waste my time. No, no. You bad news, yeah. Wow, wow. Make up your mind. Want me in or out, yeah. First I'm under your feet, then I'm never about. No, no. That's the way it goes, girl. You got the time, my baby. You're ticking on a short fuse. Don't waste my time. Hey, you bad news, yeah. The time, my baby. You're ticking on a short fuse. Don't waste my time. No, no. You bad news, yeah. A guitar, alright. Thank you very much for coming down and screaming your lungs out. Yeah. I'd just like to run around the boys in the band for you one time in case anybody doesn't know their names yet. Starting across here on our red lead guitar. That's opposed to our sort of shitty brown lead guitar. Ladies and gentlemen, hailing from Dunstan, Tyne we are. On the lead guitar, Mr. Wavy Davy Shaw. Yeah! On our other lead guitar, from South Shields, give it up for Pretty Boy, the Red One, yeah! And that just leaves the maniac at the back, beating shit out of the kid, ladies and gentlemen. On the drums, Mr. Franco Zuccaroli.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's not very often that the big fat guy gets a mention. But put your hands together for the man with the big mouth at the front, Mr. Mick Honda!
Yeah. Most important of all, do us one last favor. Give yourselves the biggest cheer of the night, please. Now. Cheer! You're like a time bomb, baby, ticking on a short fuse. A time bomb, baby, you're bad news. Pick it up, pick it up. You're like a time bomb, baby, ticking on a short fuse. A time bomb, baby. Song by the Sweet. This is Action. We'll see you.
Raconteurs News.
Good evening and welcome to Raconteurs News, bringing you untwisted, unsweetened news. And it's Tuesday, I think, isn't it, Jason?
Da.
Tuesday, the 19th of April. God, the time's whizzing by. And as always, I'm joined by Jason. How you doing, mate?
Dobry wieczór, towarzysz. Jak wy? Oh, sorry, you said you were going on Russia today. I thought we were doing this show in Russian. But hello.
Yeah, you can do it in Russian if you want, mate. No, we've got such a guest lined up tonight. I was actually getting a bit nervous before the show, but it seems at the moment that's all for nothing, because at the moment we're not able to get hold of Ed Haslam on Skype. Very sorry about that, folks. So we'll have
it's a shame, but I think we'll keep trying, won't we, throughout the course of the night, see if we can get him on.
Oh yeah, of course we will, mate. Yeah. Yeah, we've been emailing backwards and forwards today, so hopefully, he was aware of the start time and the time differences, so hopefully we'll get it sorted sometime soon. Maybe just something's cropped up his end and he's not able to get on Skype at the minute. But
that sounds painful, doesn't it? Someone's cropped up his end.
Is that
I think
an
that's probably,
experience?
if he doesn't join us, I think that's probably what sort of show we're in for tonight.
Is that something that's cropped up with you lately? Something crept up your end?
No, nothing's crept up my end. Not recently. Although I've been having these vitamin B12 injections every couple of days, and it has. Let's just say it's rather watery around there. So, yeah, my end. It's wet, shall we say?
Oh, no, that's too much information, Jason. Too much information. So, what have you noticed that's been going on in the world this week?
Well, I mean, there's tons going on, isn't there? It's I've heard everything from. I heard a rumour that the people that are in charge of this entire paradigm that we're in, these people, these dark forces that are doing this to the world. I've heard that I heard a rumour and I read an article that they've all disappeared on Sunday. They've all gone. So what we're left with is the minions, if that's to be believed, or if it's true or whatever. We're left with the minions, and so they shouldn't be too difficult to take out because they're all weak and pathetic, aren't they? I mean, they have to get somebody else to do all the bidding. So
Yeah.
there's been that. Some people have noticed that there seems to be a lull in the chemtrails as well. I don't know if you've noticed that, but there seems to, especially Sunday and today, we've had really clear skies, and there don't seem to have been any chemtrails. I'm looking out my window now. I've got a clear sky and no chemtrails, so
Yeah,
perhaps there's something in it.
We've got a few stripes in the direction of the setting sun, and I noticed a few planes going over earlier. It looked like there was spraying, leaving a few crisscross lines in the sky, but still pretty clear here, and the moon's shining nice and bright up there. But what I noticed, we had a chemtrail-free day on Sunday, and then about 1 in the morning, Monday morning, I looked out, and you could see 2 or 3 planes going across the sky. So I thought, I'll have a look on Flight Radar 24 and see what planes they are. And strangely enough, there were no planes within about 80 miles of where we are. So I thought, are they planes? Are they UFOs? Are they drones? What are they?
It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, there's an entire area to study that's absolutely enormous, and you know, if you can get yourself into that sort of thing, then it's a really interesting subject. I know that I've got a friend who I used to help, who I helped when she was a surgeon, and had a few problems regarding common purpose and funds going to different places that she didn't agree with, and she whistle blew, and they ended up trying to section her. So I helped her, but she was really interested in that sort of thing. She'd spend days, she'd go out to the shop, perhaps to the paper shop to get a newspaper or a comic or whatever you want to call them these days, and she'd take a camera with her and she'd just be taking snaps at skies. And what she used to do is she used to go and take snaps of the skies, and then when people ask her what she was doing, then she'd explain, which I thought were a really good way to get people interested in the subject.
Yeah. I mean, I find quite often if you go out somewhere and, say for argument, she's sat out in a beer garden at a pub, if you just sit there staring at the sky, people will ask you what you're looking at. And
yeah.
I was like, I'm looking at them clouds. They're all in straight lines. What's going on there then? And they just, it's just condensation trails. And this is coming from people my age and sometimes older, who I'm pretty sure ought to be able to remember the days when contrails came out of planes and they were kind of like a thumb's width at arm's length. whereas now they go right across the sky. There's crisscross and tic-tac-toe all over the sky.
Yeah, which is why it's unusual for this time of night. For usually when we've had a nice day and it's been, particularly in the morning when it's been clear, usually by this time we've got sort of a hazy mist in the sky, and it's difficult for the sun to get through. But today we seem to be okay. Well, particularly in this area, and with us just being over the other side of the Pennines from Manchester Airport. And, of course, we've got the ridiculously named Sheffield Doncaster Airport, which is, like, nowhere near Sheffield at all, and not really that much near Doncaster, but it's the old RAF Finningley airbase that they've turned into Doncaster Airport. Robin Hood Airport. So Doncaster's claimed Robin Hood as well.
Yeah. Well, everywhere claims Robin Hood, doesn't it?
I suppose. I mean, it was called Robin of Loxley, and Loxley's sort of in Sheffield, I believe, is a suburb in Sheffield. So
I saw a really interesting presentation about that at the Probe conference a couple of years ago when we had that UFO sighting outside. And I can't remember the name of the guy, but he'd really done a lot of homework into the history of Robin Hood. And he'd worked out, he reckoned he was buried at, I think it was under the walls of Wakefield Castle. But he had his last meal at a priory, I think it was, not far from here, at Swine's Head.
All right.
So he was all over Lincolnshire, Staffordshire, I think. But then there's so many conflicting stories. But he reckoned the story that most people know was basically a fictional creation from the Victorian era. But there was some real history on the guy.
Yeah, it's all very interesting, and also this week, as Lee's just pointed out in the chat room, we've had a number of earthquakes, haven't we? We've had Japan and Ecuador. And isn't there some? Isn't Ecuador going to stop using US dollars or something? I think I read something that there's some sort of conspiracy reason that Ecuador has been chosen, and again, people get HARP out, which I'm not entirely convinced with. I mean, HARP seems to be. I've got no doubt that it exists, and that the weather modifications are things that they're attempting to do or they try to do, but I just don't know how accurate it is to be causing earthquakes, in different parts of the world. I don't know about yourself. I don't know very much about HARP.
No, I've kind of looked at it quite a few times, and they do seem to be able to manipulate these, call them clouds if you like, and cause all kind of freaky weather systems. But as far as earthquakes, I have heard it suggested that any earthquake with a epicenter which is more than 2 or 3 miles deep, it might be a bit more than that, but some of these are now up to 50 miles deep, which is supposedly not natural. They're saying that these particular earthquakes are caused by HARP. So, but without first-hand knowledge, how do you know it's the truth?
Exactly. I mean, Unique Lee's just popped in again in chat box, and he says it's geoengineering is its proper title. Yeah, and it is. But I did see. I don't know if anybody's seen this, but I did see a presentation a guy did. I think where it was at Lytham, in New Horizons, and he was doing a flat Earth presentation, and he claimed that the chemtrails and all this sort of stuff, it wasn't real. It wasn't. There was no extra barium in. That whatever that they're supposed to be putting in there.
Yeah, barium, aluminium, strontium, all kinds
Yeah,
of
heavy metals. Yeah, those sort of things. He was claiming that the evidence doesn't really mount up due to the amounts that you can find in the atmosphere. So who knows? Again, it's one of those things where it's almost impossible to prove, but the more and more evidence that there is, the more and more it becomes likely. And when you know the people that you're dealing with, or the beings, or the entities, or whatever that you're dealing with, then it is quite understandable.
Yeah.
That they try and do something like that. Yeah, but I don't know how many people, how big these earthquakes are, because I really don't watch. I don't watch the news.
No.
I switched it on the other day, and all we got was this celebrity that had been in this having threesomes, and he's got a super injunction against the son from naming him. But I think everybody in the entire world knows who they're talking about, which celebrity couple they're talking about. But yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm not going to say anything at all.
You're being a bit like a candle in the wind there, aren't you?
That's right. I mean, I'd have to say sorry, and that's I think it's the hardest word.
Yeah.
I'm not going to. I'm not even going to speculate on who that might be. I have absolutely no idea whatsoever. And also the other. What was the other silly celebrity story that was in? It's been ridiculous. We have demonstrations in London, 150,000 people demonstrating in London. Nothing on the BBC whatsoever. Anybody, if you dip your wick and you're a celebrity, and to be fair, I don't really care what celebrities do at all, as long as it's legal, as
long as they leave me alone, I'm not bothered. Interesting post from Lee in the chat room. He said that it's from the UK government's view on geoengineering research. It says geoengineering can be described as the deliberate intervention in the planetary environment of a nature and scale intended to counteract man-made climate change and or its impacts, or in layman terms, we're going to interfere in natural processes and circumvent them with artificial. Thanks, the MO of the entire system, Lee, throughout. Oh, that's from Rob Freeman. Good evening, Rob. Nice to see you about, mate.
Good evening, Robert. I am from your neck of the woods.
Oh, of course, you're same part of the world, aren't you? Yeah,
same part of the world as Rob. Yeah, he's. We had him speaking at. He came and did a talk at the Genting when I used to do Friends of UK column South Yorkshire. When I used to do the meetings there, we had Rob came up and did a great talk. It's on my YouTube account. But yeah, it's a great thought again. From we're going in to interfere in natural processes and circumvent them with artificial. See, that seems to be everything. Everything seems to be anything that's real is being replaced with something artificial. Like we used to have music, and we used to have real entertainment and real TV. But now it's sort of, I know TV and entertainment have been used over the years, but not in the same way that they're used today. I mean, particularly advertising for charities and things like that. But yeah, everything seems to anything that's got any value, it seems to be turned into something artificial, with where we're supposed to believe it's got the same value as the original, but it really hasn't. I don't know if you understand what I'm talking about. It's just
yeah, I get what you mean. I was having a conversation with somebody the other night, and it was about TV, and they're saying, "Oh, it's a really nice way to switch off at the end of the night and chill out." And I'm thinking, well, I could probably think of better ways, but they said, "Yeah, you need to watch it and just see how really bad it's been." But I'm thinking, well, It's a while now since we stopped watching TV, and on the odd occasion that we do think, oh, that might be worth having a check out and maybe get iPlayer up or something like that. It is such utter garbage, and particularly those stations that have adverts, which is everyone except the Buggering British Children Foundation. They're just dreadful. I mean, the adverts are so overtly in your face, and they just really wind me up.
Particularly the charity ones. The charity ones really.
Oh yeah.
Really, I sit and watch the charity ones, and my missus watches TV. So when we're sat together, she's usually watching TV, and I'm perhaps reading a book or just reading something on the internet. But it's there in the background. You see, the problem is when people say, "Oh, it's a great way to unwind." Yeah, it may be, but don't forget that all this, you might be ignoring the rubbish, but it's all going into your subconscious. And once it's in your subconscious, it resides in there, and there's not really anything you can do about it unless you know it's in there. So you just have to be really careful. I mean, if you look at the neuro-linguistic programming, sorry about that, particularly the cancer charities, the cancer charities will have some woman coming on who wants other women to dress up in pink and run around and round and round on a field until they've raised enough money for the CEO's £250,000 salary. First, that's got to be the first thing they've got to raise. But they'll come on and they'll say, and they use neuro-linguistic programming like, I think this year it's we told cancer last year, but cancer doesn't seem to have got the message. I mean, that's neuro. I mean, how can cancer? It's a disease. How can it get a message? It can't. That's pure neuro-linguistic programming. And the problem is with it is if you can see it, it's fine. If you can see it and you can understand it for what it is, it's fine. But what it is actually doing is it knows that there's a lot of people watching who have lost somebody to cancer, perhaps in the last year or so. And they feel that they want to do something, and they feel that they want to help, and they want to do something in the name of in the name of to honour their relative or the friend that's died. And you see, these people, these parasites, they pick up on that. So people want to do something. So it's like the Hegelian dialectic: problem, reaction, solution. The problem is cancer's a huge. I mean, even though a fraction of the people these days smoke, compared to a few decades ago, but yet the cancer rate has.
It's gone off the scale, hasn't it? Yeah.
It's exploded, and nobody's saying, "Oh, hang on a minute, just hang on a second, just a second. Aren't we supposed to be living longer? Aren't our lifestyles supposed to be better? Aren't we?" But no, our lifestyles aren't better. We generally try to suggest that things are better now than they used to be when it's just not the case. I mean, we're in the period in history, the only period in history where poor people are fatter than rich people.
A bit of a clue there, isn't there?
There you go.
Yeah, if you eat crap food, you're not going to get the nourishment, so you need to eat shed loads of it, and it's going to make you fat.
Speaking of shit food as well, I noticed that McDonald's. I noticed an article. I think it was on Bookface. An article about McDonald's are now going to be introducing all-you-can-eat fries. So you can buy fries. Would you like medium, large? Because there's never any small. It's always medium or large.
Yeah.
You say to these people, well, why don't you say small and large? Oh, well, I don't know. It's just how it means. You're trying to fool people.
Yeah.
That's all it is. It's a medium. So now, do you like medium, large, or would you like unlimited? You can see a lot of people in there. Oh, you can eat chips. It'd be ideal when it comes out and you can help perhaps a homeless person, just take them in, get them some more you can eat chips and say, there you go, fill yourself.
Did you ever see that, what was it, that film called Super Size Me, with that guy called Morgan Spurlock? And he lived on a diet of nothing but McDonald's for 30 days. And part of the challenge was that if anybody in the McDonald's that served him said, do you want to supersize that? He had to do it. And it very nearly killed him. You know, he was borderline liver failure, and it took him quite a while to recover after it.
Yeah. Mithrin's just said that says, I've not checked this, but apparently until recently Japan had almost 25% of adults smoked, and they had the longest life expectancy. How could that be? How could that be?
Maybe they're not telling us the truth about something. That seems a familiar story. And interesting note there, what Lee's just posted in the chat room. Cancer, brackets lung, is treatable naturally. First-hand knowledge. I'm really pleased to hear that, Lee. That's good news, mate.
It is good news, yeah. I mean, we're not sat here encouraging people to smoke. Obviously, no. But there are far worse, I think anyway, there are far worse things for you that you're encouraged to do that potentially give you cancer. And why are there more people dying from cancer now than when we had a population where perhaps 50% of people smoked? And also, you notice as well, on the continent, particularly in Spain or Greece or things like that, everybody smokes, but they have a lot better diets. They generally tend to have a lot better diets. They eat more fresh vegetables and olive oil and things like that, and live longer. So, but they also, well, as far as I can remember, when I've been abroad, most people smoke. Yeah,
I remember when I used to go on regular holidays, when I was a bit better fixed up for cash, I used to go to Turkey twice a year.
Oh dear.
And everybody smokes. You know, you get off at the airport. My first experience of Turkey was like, it was like getting off the plane, I think it was 4 a.m, was like going out of a cold store into a massive oven. And it was so hot. And as you walked into into the airport building, there was these signs everywhere, no smoking. I think it were 10 million lira fine at the time. And I thought it was quite strange that everybody in the queue was smoking. I thought, that's a bit odd. So I lit one up. And then when I got to the front, I saw that the people who were taking the £10 out of your passport and putting the stamp on there, they were all smoking as well. So the same happened when I lived over in Spain. You know, you go to the bank, there were no smoking signs everywhere, and even the bank tellers were smoking. You got invited into the bank manager's office for any reason. The first thing he ever did was open the top drawer of his desk and get his packet of Marlboro out and offer you one. But where I lived in the Costa Blanca region, at the time, I'm pretty sure that they were the longest lived population in mainland Europe, and everybody smoked.
Yeah, I think they're trying to tackle that, because I went to Turkey in 2011 and I stopped in a hotel. It were near Ephesus, one of the 7 wonders of the world, because we went there just to have a look round. Obviously, you a bus ride away from one of the 7 wonders of the world, you go and have a look. But in Turkey, what I noticed is on the TV, when somebody was smoking, it was blanked out. The cigarette was blanked out, and it was like, well, surely everybody knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
How is that helping? It's just like saying, please don't smoke, but look, this is what this guy's doing. They're drawing attention to it. Normally, you wouldn't even notice if someone was smoking in a film. But you did, because it was blanked out. It had like a little blurred bit where the cigarette was. Just absolutely ridiculous.
Oh, we've got Non-Violent Extreme in the chat room. Welcome to Raconteurs News. Said they called McDee's about additives causing cancer, and the UK customer services didn't have a clue. I've actually seen a recording of a similar call to that. And, you know, the UK customer services, they've got no idea about what's really going on.
Yeah, well, we don't have that sort of customer services anyway. I mean, look at I'll bring you up to date on the BBC and how they stole my YouTube video and put it on Panorama, and so I've been in touch with them.
Oh yeah, how's that going? Yeah.
Yeah, well, I phoned them on the following Monday, I think it was, and then the Monday after that, a week later, I phoned them again and I said, listen, I made this complaint, and the guy said, oh, with complaints all we do is we log them, we don't get in touch with you and everything, we log them and then we deal with them. And I said, well, it was actually about Panorama stealing some of my, using some of my footage without my permission, and obviously they've not paid for it, which, you know, they have to do.
Yeah.
And he said, oh, well, that's a completely different story then. And he looked into it and he said, okay, well, it's been, in fact, this was last Wednesday. He says, we tried to get back to you in 7 working days and it's only been 5. So now we're coming up to Wednesday again. So that's another week later. So that's going to be another 5 working days. And yet still I've not heard anything. So, but it seems that I've got this, it's the same with the police. Regarding when they come and smash their way into my house, they seem to be really stalling, and it should have been a case of them, according to the inspector that I spoke to, it should have been a case of them just getting hold of the warrant, which would say, there you go, they were entitled to do that, but it seems they're having a lot of trouble. So I'm just going to leave them for a while. They can stew and stew and stew, and then we'll hit them with some stuff after a while. But yeah, you don't get any customer service. Nobody wants to know. Yeah, if you're an individual, all they want to do is just want to try and just put you down. And yeah, that's right. Don't want dissent in the ranks. We do, though, don't we?
Well, yeah, I suppose that, the police are going to be aware of your health condition, so I suppose they might be hanging it out in case you get really ill, and then you won't be able to pursue it. You know, that's what they might be hoping for.
That's probably this. It's probably it. They probably are waiting for me to die. I know that sounds ridiculous and it sounds really conspiratorial, but you know, it's not that far away, because they know exactly how bad my health condition has been. I mean, it's not nowhere near as bad at the moment, but they have had a couple of goes at me with the old heart attack machine, heart attack gun.
Oh yeah, that's. I mean, I can't imagine what it's like to be. I mean, you're a bit younger than me, Jason. What it's like to have had a couple of heart attacks at your age. It must be quite freaky.
Well, it's. I'm pretty pragmatic about it. I mean, I like to just think, well, I'm going to have to play the hand that I've been dealt. You know, I can't do anything else. And at the moment, walking's not very easy for me. But I still managed to operate to a certain degree. But yeah, it is, especially when you consider that my mum is 60. I don't want to get in trouble. 66, I think, and my dad is 69. He's nearly 70. And they both go to the gym every day.
Wow. And
my sister, who's 40, she's a couple of years younger than me, she's 43, she's a fitness instructor. And so I just got everything. I think they just like earmarked things for my family, and I just got it all. So, but you live with it, and it's you just have to live with it. And
Yeah, you seem to have drawn the short straw there, mate. And I know how you feel with that, because my father's 78, I believe. Yeah, 78, I think. And he, no, it must be 79 now. And he walks for miles every day. Yet if I walk more than about 50 yards, I'm absolutely knackered. Not because I'm lazy, not because I'm fat. It's because my spine's screwed up, and it just causes me so much pain. But I've lived with that for 30 odd years now, and you just kind of think, well, I can't do anything to change it, so just got to get on with it, haven't you?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not like people do look at me and sort of think I've got a disabled badge, so when I pull up in my car and I park in a disabled spot, it's not uncommon for somebody to look at me and then look and make sure my badge is in order, So it's just absolutely. You just have to take it for what it is, and it's not like when I was younger I abused my body. I used to play football to quite a good level. I've scored goals in football grounds that people have seen on TV. I've got videos of me playing football, and I played at quite a high level. And it was actually that when I was playing football, when I had my first heart attack, I was actually on a field, and I did the old like the Tottenham, the Bolton player did a couple of years ago. I did the same thing. I just went over, and I were in hospital for all that time and had a heart attack. But at that time, they didn't know what had caused it. So it's only 2012. So I had a heart attack in 1997, and it's 2012 before I get a diagnosis of what I've got, and then I have another one in 2015. Yeah, 2015, wasn't it, last year? So it was 18 years, and the funny thing was...
Oh, can I just stop you there, Ed? Jason, we've got Ed Haslam calling. So.
Oh, lovely. Get him on.
Hi, Ed. Oh. Hi, Ed.
Hey, Andy.
Oh, great. We've finally managed to get hold of you. We're live. We started without you, mate, because we couldn't get hold of you. But
I was told it's 10 minutes of 8 GMT time.
Yeah,
that's what my computer tells me.
Oh, GMT. Yeah, you see, we're pretty summertime now, aren't we?
Ah.
Oh, well, your producer told me GMT.
My apologies for the confusion, Ed. No worries. We've got you here anyway. Welcome to Raconteurs News. And it's great to finally speak to you. We've been emailing backwards and forth for several weeks now, haven't we?
Uh-huh.
And my lovely Tina got me a copy of your book, Dr. Mary's Monkey, which I've read from cover to cover, and I must say, what a great read it was.
Thank you.
Would you like to tell our listeners a little bit, because it's quite an amazing story, how you didn't really find this story, the story found you, didn't it?
Well, have you read the subtitle to your readers yet? Why don't you start with that, and then I'll be happy to pick up from there.
I haven't got it in front of me at the moment. Sorry.
Okay. Well, I can pick that up. I've got it in front of me. The name of the book is Dr. Mary's Monkey: How the Unsolved Murder of a Doctor, a Secret Laboratory in New Orleans, and Cancer-Causing Monkey Viruses are linked to Lee Harvey Oswald, the JFK assassination, and emerging global epidemics. Now, I am from New Orleans originally. I live in Florida now. But when I grew up in New Orleans, I grew up with a lot of very strange things around me. And when I became an adult, I decided to go back and look at those things. And I didn't know if I was going to be able to document them enough where I could talk about them in public. The first thing I should say is that my father was a doctor, and he was a professor at Tulane Medical School. He taught orthopedic surgery, And in 1964, in the summer of 1964, one of his colleagues, friends and colleagues, someone he knew very well, was murdered.
Mm-hmm.
And this was a very strange murder. It's never been solved. What happened at the time was everybody was told all kind of terrible rumors that made them wanted to back away from the murder and not even discuss it. The doctor in question was a 51-year-old woman by the name of Mary Sherman. She was found naked in her bedroom. She had been stabbed 7 or 8 times and set on fire. And that's what the public was told. There were all kind of rumors about kinky sex slashings and all that stuff going on. And then a couple weeks later, the investigation into her murder was shut down. Just the police said, we're not going to be able to solve this.
Who was it that shut it down? Sorry, Ed, it's Jason here. Who was it that shut it down? Who was responsible for shutting it down? Do you know?
Well, the only thing you heard was the police shut it down. Now, did somebody tell the police to shut it down from above? I think that's where it comes from. As you get into this one murder, it's a little bit like peeling an onion, or the deeper you get into it, the more connections you see to other places, and you realize how politically charged this is. And so what happened was the police called a press conference and said, we're not going to be able to solve this one. So everybody back to work. And it was, well, because my father knew this woman, my father was actually even asked to go to the morgue and look at the body to get a second opinion on her death. Mm-hmm. My father told my mother things, as happens in families, and my mother told me things, as happens in families, and I was told things that the public was not told. And the first thing I was told was that Mary Sherman's right arm was missing. And the public was never told this, and I'll tell you how I know that in a second. Mm-hmm. The other thing I knew that the public didn't know was really who Mary Sherman was. And most people thought that she was, just a local doctor, but she was from the University of Chicago, where they developed nuclear power. She was personal friends with Enrico Fermi, who is considered by many to be the father of the atomic bomb. She was published in the area of cancer and in the area of radiology in the peer-reviewed journals. So what you had this world-class doctor died, and it was 28 years later that I finally got my hands on the official documents, and by official documents I mean the police reports, the autopsy reports, the homicide department reports, and all of the media coverage. And I put them on my breakfast table, 2 stacks, and I read through them, and I realized the public was never told Mary Sherman's right arm had been disintegrated by heat, burned off, as had her rib cage. The cops on the scene said they could stand there and see the internal organs of her body. Now, right next to that burn, which is a charred black carbonizing burn that takes thousands of degrees to do, right next to that was her hair, her unburned hair. And the hair on her skin was unburned. Her pubic hair was unburned. All right. So how do you get thousands of degrees to disintegrate an arm and rib cage next to unburned hair?
Well, it wouldn't certainly be by piling some clothes on top of a body and letting them smoulder as was supposed to be the case, would it? That's
right. I mean, mattress fires don't burn off arms. No. In fact, I had a doctor from New Orleans call me once who said, her job, having worked at Charity Hospital in the emergency room, she would occasionally have to go to house fires and pronounce people dead. And she said, I'm talking about fires where the entire house was burning out of control and crashed in on the bodies. And the bodies looked like burned marshmallows, but they still had their arms and legs.
Yeah.
Okay? The only thing that burns off a limb like this and destroys bones is high voltage electricity.
Mm-hmm.
And when you realize that, you say, well, so what burned off her arm? The toaster? Was there anything in her apartment that could have possibly done this type of damage? And that's when you get to that point, you suddenly realize that since there's nothing in her apartment, it's a wood frame building. The building was so poorly constructed, I'll say, that the neighbors downstairs used to hear the doctor walking around in her slippers upstairs. And of course, nobody heard anything this night, Mm-hmm. So you have to be left with a conclusion that whatever burned off Mary Sherman's right arm and rib cage happened somewhere else. They brought her body back to her apartment and they faked a murder scene. So this is the forensic part of the puzzle. Then now comes another plank on this. In the 1960s, now I'm from New Orleans, right? The big event in the 1960s was Jim Garrison investigated the Kennedy assassination.
Uh-huh.
And that's the basis of Oliver Stone's movie, JFK.
Yeah.
And in October of 1967, Garrison gave an interview to Playboy magazine. It was published in October of 67. And in that, he was asked about an odd question about Jack Ruby dying of cancer. And he said, I can't answer that, but I can tell you that this doctor in New Orleans was working with his primary suspect, David Ferry, on some kind of secret cancer experiments. And that there were a number of doctors involved, and they had 2,000 white mice in cages. And so this was published in the press, and nobody knew what to make about it. Again, they thought Mary Sherman was a local doctor. They didn't realize that she was a world-class expert in cancer and a world-class expert in radiation. But I knew these things, and I looked it up in the scientific directories. So what happens then is you start asking questions. You ask the logical questions. Who did she work for?
Mm-hmm.
Well, she worked for, she had a couple of jobs. One of them, she was a professor at Tulane Medical School with my father, where they both taught orthopedic surgery. But where she got most of her money from was working at Ochsner Clinic. Mm-hmm. And she ran a cancer laboratory for Ochsner Clinic. And she was a partner. She was the only female on the partner on the staff there. And Ochsner is a very interesting guy. One of the things that is interesting about him is he was the president of the American Cancer Society in the late 40s. And another thing is I have his FBI file, and he has a 40-year history of doing secret assignments for the U.S. military. So this guy is not an ordinary doctor. He is a spook doctor for the U.S. military. And I have a document signed by J. Edgar Hoover, head of the FBI, approving him for a sensitive position for the United States government. Okay, at this point in time, you start building a little curiosity about who this Dr. Ochsner guy is. And then you say, well, what else was going on at the time? Mm-hmm. Well, one thing was the polio vaccine. And it turns out, and this all goes back to polio, and I'm going to talk a lot about polio, but just the top line part of it here is that the polio vaccine was released in the United States in 1955. And there were six pharmaceuticals, six labs producing the vaccine. And one of those labs was Cutter Laboratories. and Dr. Oshner was the major stockholder in Cutter Laboratories. So he's got one foot in cancer, being the president of the American Cancer Society. He's got another foot in the polio vaccine. And so this, so we started looking into the polio vaccine. And I realize you guys are, in Britain, UK, and so let me sort of take this part of the story a little bit deeper. Sir Alexander Fleming is one of the big heroes in Britain for developing penicillin.
Yeah.
And he was a frontline doctor during World War I in a field hospital. And back in those days, this is before penicillin, even before blood typing, if you got shot on the front lines with a rifle in the torso, you were going to die because they couldn't stop the infections. And Fleming was so frustrated by this. I mean, he said they were killing as many British soldiers with their own antiseptics as actually were dying from infections from the gunshot wounds. So he came back to London after the war, and he decided to start researching autoimmunity and figuring out how the body prevented infections. And he was particularly interested in why the eyes don't get infected, because they're actually kind of part of the brain that's sticking out through the skin. And he was working at St. Mary's there, and he was doing a number of experiments. And one day he's sitting there in his lab eating a sandwich. He's about to go on holiday. And he was kind of a sloppy eater, and some of the sandwich got into one of the Petri dishes. Well, he put the lid on the Petri dish, and he went on holiday for a month. And when he came back and they opened up the Petri dish, the bread from the sandwich had turned to mold, and the mold had killed all the bacteria in the Petri dish. And he said, wow, I didn't realize mold could kill bacteria. And that was the beginning of what happens with the development of penicillin. He writes a paper on it. And it gets published and buried in the libraries for 13 years. And then as World War II starts to warm up and the British government realizes they're going to be sending more soldiers over to fight on the continent, and they're going to have lots of gunshot wounds, and they really start looking around for something that might stop the infections. And they find Fleming's article, and they give it to a handful of scientists out at Oxford, and they takes them a couple of years, but they figure out how to make a medicine out of this, and they develop penicillin. And so they now have something that you can take somebody with, horrible diseases like gonorrhea, syphilis, pneumonia, or severe infections, and give them a shot and cure them. Okay, the problem is they don't have very much of it, and it's hard to make. And at the time, the Germans have started bombing Britain. So it's not a real good time to build a factory. Okay?
No.
So the British turn to the Americans and say, look, we've got the science. We need you guys to build a factory and start producing this stuff on a large scale, so we've got it for our military. And you can have it for your military, and we can all stop this stuff. And so in 1942, they basically... They say, hey, this is a lot like making beer. They get a big vat, and they start making this stuff by the millions of gallons. So all of a sudden in 1942, antibiotics are released all over the place, particularly, I'm looking at this from the American point of view, all over the United States. Well, I'm thinking about polio, right? So I go and get the history of polio. And I realized the polio epidemic, what we call in the 1950s, actually started in 1943. So what happened? I mean, it jumps from 2,000 cases a year to over 10,000 cases a year, then to 20,000, then to 30,000, then to 40,000, then to 50,000. It erupts starting in 1943. So you have to ask the question, is there something happened in 1942 that led to the polio epidemic? Because, the polio had been cooking along at 2,000 or 3,000 cases a year in the United States all the way back to 1900, with the exception of 1 year in 1916 when they started blood transfusions. So you got this weird situation where you've got what is arguably the biggest advance in the history of medicine, which is the introduction of antibiotics, and which does great things. But because something does great things does not mean it does not have some side effects, bad side effects. And so one of the things that's happening is somehow the use of these antibiotics are leading to increase polio. Now here's one of the things about polio a lot of people don't realize. If you took 1,000 kids, whatever, and exposed them to the polio virus, 99% of them don't get polio. Only a fraction of 1% gets polio. And so the question is, why is this part of 1% getting this disease and everybody else is not? Well, what's happening is polio is all over the place. I mean, and generally goes in the mouth, through the intestines, out the bottom, and does not cause disease. But some of these kids have problems in their intestines. They have parasites, they may have something else. And if the polio virus is able to get through the intestinal lining into the blood, then it goes up to the brain and starts eating the brainstem. And now you got polio. Okay? So what the pharmaceuticals find themselves in this situation where they've got a huge success on their hands with the introduction of antibiotics. It's changing everything. I mean, 1/3 of the hospital beds, or maybe half in the United States, were full of people dying of syphilis in the early 40s. Okay, that's how bad the situation was. And they now all of a sudden have something in a syringe that cures it. Okay, so the pharmaceuticals either need to pull back on the antibiotics, or they need to push for a vaccine.
So, was there any sort of like clusters of outbreaks that would suggest that there's something in the area, or do you think it's a genetic thing?
Oh, I don't think it's genetic. I'm getting the feedback, guys.
Don't know why that suddenly started, Ed.
I don't either.
Has it gone now?
Well, I'll try it again. I'm good. I'm not hearing the echo. So what happens is the reason you take antibiotics is that they kill bacteria, right? But they kill the bad bacteria, but they also kill the good bacteria. And you've got a lot of good bacteria in your intestines that is essential for your health. Okay, and there's sort of a war going on in your intestines between this good bacteria, like acidophilus, and a fungus that lives in there by the name of Candida albicans. Mm-hmm. And if you take an antibiotic and kill off all the good bacteria, then there's nothing to eat the fungus, and the fungus starts growing out of control. And once Candida starts growing out of control, its roots start to grow into your intestinal wall. And now, stuff that belongs inside the intestines, like food particles and viruses and everything else, is now able to get through the intestinal wall into your bloodstream. And once it gets into the bloodstream, it doesn't take it more than a minute to get to your brain. And that's where the damage from polio comes from. Okay, so the pharmaceuticals in the 40s realized they had this problem, and they either had to back off on the antibiotics, which were the most successful and profitable things they ever did, or they had to push for a vaccine. And so you're talking about the wealthiest corporations in America pushing the media to create this sense of hysteria that we need to have a mandatory vaccine to stop polio. Okay, so they're in a hurry, and they've got this hysteria going on. And so what you've got in the 1950s is you've got a couple of groups of people, one by the name of Jonas Salk, and who's working on a vaccine, another group I'll talk about in a minute. And there's 3 flavors of polio, heavy, medium, and light. And Salk says, all you got to do is deal with polio heavy. Mm-hmm. And you drowned it in formaldehyde. And then we inject your children with a dead monkey virus. Okay? Now, it's dead, so it's not going to be able to breed, and your immune system will develop a immune reaction to it. Well, so this is the strategy behind the Salk vaccine. And in April of 1955, they hold a big press conference at the University of Michigan, and they announced that the Salk vaccine has been tested on 1,500 children and has proven to be safe and effective. And everybody roll up your sleeves, get ready, because we're about to start the polio vaccine. Mm-hmm. Now, at this point in time, they have not gotten government approval yet. Okay? So they turn to Dr. Bernice Eddy, who is the official vaccine safety tester for the United States government. And they say, Dr. Eddy, it's time for you to approve these vaccines. We're ready to release them. Well, she takes her vaccines back and injects them into her monkeys, and she gets back dead and crippled monkeys.
Yeah.
And she says, look, guys, there's a problem here. And I don't exactly know what the problem is right now, but if you release this, you're going to have a real problem on your hands. And the good news is that the problem is only with one batch of the vaccines, the batch produced by Cutter Laboratories. Mm-hmm. So, they pick up the phone and call Cutter Laboratories and say, guys, time to back off. We got a problem with your vaccine, not everybody else's. Well, the major stockholder in Cutter Laboratories is Dr. Oshner. So he's the guy that gets the phone call. He says, are you kidding me? He said, I've known Jonas Salk for 20 years. I've been with this thing every step of the way. I'm not going to let some bureaucrat mess up the biggest event in medical history at the last minute by throwing some red tape at us. So Oshner at the time, he is chief of surgery at Tulane Medical School. So he calls the faculty of Tulane Medical School into the amphitheater. My father's on the faculty. Mary Sherman's on the faculty. They're sitting there in the amphitheater while Oshner's saying, you probably heard there's a question about this polio vaccine, about whether or not it's safe. He said, I'm here to tell you I think it's safe. And I would never ask you to do anything that I wouldn't do. So I'm going to inoculate my grandchildren right here, right now in front of you to prove to you that I think it's safe, which he does. And in about 72 hours, his grandson is dead from polio, and his granddaughter has been crippled by polio. This puts Dr. Oshner very close to this polio problem. Okay? So what happens is they withdraw the Salk vaccine. They fire the Secretary of Health, Education, and Welfare, which is like one of your ministers, okay? They fire the entire management of the National Institute of Health. And they've come up with a new vaccine called the Sabin vaccine. And Sabin said, you don't have to mess with polio heavy. Polio light causes the same immune response. And it's safe. So we're just going to use polio light. Okay? So they have this new vaccine, and they, with great fanfare, they release it. And we're talking 1956 here or so. And meanwhile, you remember this Bernice Eddy woman I was telling you about, the vaccine safety tester? She and this other woman by the name of Sarah Stewart at the National Cancer Institute are doing some research up there, and they find a virus that causes cancer. Right? People have been looking for this for years, but they find it, right? And this one virus causes multiple types of cancer in multiple animals, mostly hamsters and laboratory animals they work with. And they name it poly, meaning many, oma, meaning tumors, polyoma. Well, the moment they discover this, the United States Congress starts giving them, handing out money, big money, for people to buy electron microscopes and to get busy on this virus cancer connection. And they start cataloging all of the viruses that are in the monkey labs. Okay. Well, what happens is they find this polyoma virus, which Stuart and Eddie had been working with in hamsters. They find it in the Asian macaque, commonly known as the rhesus monkey, which is an Asian monkey. Okay. And this monkey is used in human medical research because it has the blood that is most like human blood. All right. And they discovered, well, that's the basis of it. Now, here's the problem. When Salk and Sabin were making their polio vaccines, they grew the polio virus for the vaccine on monkey kidney tissues, monkey kidney cells from the rhesus monkey. And they all of a sudden realized, uh-oh, did that virus get into the polio vaccine? And after they had already released 100 million doses of the polio vaccine, they realized that there was a cancer-causing virus in it. Now this... I'm sorry, Jason?
I'm just saying outrageous, that's all.
Yeah. This is the biggest mistake in the history of government. I mean, there's nothing that's a mistake of this dimension that's ever happened. And so, the American government sort of says, well, we got to do two things. One is we have to mark this as a national security secret because we don't want to tell the public this has happened. And we want to get really busy trying to find a solution. And the solution needs to be a vaccine that will stop this virus before the cancer epidemic kicks in. Now, we're sitting here in 2016, and, the question is, do we have a cancer epidemic? Yes, we do.
No doubt about it, Ed, yeah.
And when I originally came out with this story in 1995, nobody was using the words cancer epidemic. I said, well, we got to start using it because this is, 20 times the size of the polio epidemic. And they called polio an epidemic. Why wouldn't they call cancer an epidemic? Okay. So the question, therefore, becomes, is the current cancer epidemic the result of the cancer-causing virus that was released in 200 million doses of the polio vaccine? Okay, and when I first got my hands around this question, it's a hard question to ask. It's so terrifying. You don't really want to know what the answer is. But I went to the medical library and I got the cancer statistics, and they're in my book around page 200, showing that there was an eruption of soft tissue cancers after the polio vaccine. And so what happens is, this is when in 1959 they realize this. This is when they start the secret project to try to develop the vaccine. And this is when we find Dr. Oshner getting this approval from J. Edgar Hoover for this sensitive position he's got to carry out. Now, the point as it relates to Mary Sherman's murder is something burned off Mary Sherman's right arm. And it was a very powerful piece of electronic equipment. And I was told through casual sources in New Orleans, but reliable sources from my physics teacher, who was a Jesuit priest, that there was a linear particle accelerator in uptown New Orleans being used for some kind of secret research. And he said it was not on Tulane's campus, but it was by Tulane's campus. Well, when I finally put the two and two together is that Mary Sherman's arm was burned off with a powerful piece of electronic equipment that she was working with. And we had to find the equipment. And I finally tracked it down, and it was on U.S. government property on the campus of what's called a U.S. Public Health Service hospital, which took care of the military. This hospital had about 13 buildings on it, and we found the building that it was in, and we had all this strange wiring on it. I've had an engineer that was in the building and said you could have run a city off of the amount of electricity that was in this one building. But they had removed the equipment, but they left all the wiring there. And one of the strange things in the building was that they had a steel wall with a big cable that went into the ground. Well, what happened to Mary Sherman was that she grabbed something, the handle, with her right hand, and she was standing in front of the steel wall, and this huge amount of electricity climbed up her arm and went out the back of her shoulder into this wall, and it was so intense that it disintegrated her arm, just absolutely vaporized it. And now they had a problem because this project, what are they doing with this project? This is a Medical Manhattan Project. They're trying to develop a vaccine to stop a epidemic of cancer, which is related to the polio vaccine. And they don't want to tell the public what they're doing. And so now they have this scientist who's been maimed on the floor of this laboratory. And they're about to, they're risking exposing this secret laboratory. So they decide to bring her back to her apartment and fake a murder scene. And so that's how Mary Sherman loses her arm, and that's how she gets back there. Okay. And that's one part of the story. There's other parts we'll get to in a second. But that's, let me see if you guys got any questions at this point.
Sure, Ed. We've got several questions coming from the chat room.
Okay.
The first one was from Mithrin, and he said, I know it's a bit early, but when relevant, now's as good a time as any. How does the guest know that someone pierced her heart with an implement?
It's in the autopsy report.
Yeah, I believe so. We've got another one from Mithrin. Joe Pesci's character, David Ferry, in JFK was heavily into cancer research. Is he linked into this case?
Yes, he is.
Big time, isn't he?
Yes, and that's one of the things that Jim Garrison said in that Playboy interview. He said that Mary Sherman and David Ferry were doing this secret cancer research together. And Garrison's people thought that they were working on some kind of biological weapon to kill Fidel Castro. And to put this in context, remember I said 1959, Ochsner gets this approval from J. Edgar Hoover. Mm-hmm. They install this linear particle accelerator in uptown New Orleans, right down the street from Ochsner's house. Okay, in uptown New Orleans in 1960-61, they assembled this whole team of specialists down there. Mary Sherman's on the team because she is an expert in cancer. And so in 60-61, they are roasting these monkey viruses with radiation, trying to disarm them, trying to find a benign strain that they can use for a vaccine. Because, I said polio, there was heavy, medium, and light. Well, there's only one strain of this polyoma, and it's bad. It's heavy, okay? Yeah. And they need it to mutate. And in fact, they rename it during this time. It's now called SV40. It's monkey virus number 40, but the scientific word for monkey is simian. So they call it simian virus number 40. And so that's what they're doing in 1960-61. Along comes 1962, and we've got Castro in Cuba, but now we've got Russian nuclear missiles in Cuba pointing at New Orleans. Right? This is the height of the Cold War. This is the Cuban Missile Crisis. And New Orleans is the mouth of the Mississippi River, with its main business is trade. the moment they put the embargo on Cuba, New Orleans lost 25% of its trade. We got Che Guevara going around trying to spread the revolution to the rest of Latin America. If that happens, there goes the free labor, there goes the coffee, there goes the bananas, there goes the rest of the sugar cane. So New Orleans feels very threatened by communism and by Castro. And the decision is made amongst the group of people who are the CIA on one hand, and they are working with the mafia. And they actually set up an operation called Operation Mongoose for this. And the goal of Mongoose is to figure out a way to kill Fidel Castro. And so they're looking at this project that they've got going on in New Orleans where they're looking for a vaccine, and they're getting back stronger and stronger viruses that cause cancer. And they say, we can weaponize this. We can keep exposing this stuff to radiation and find out which things grow the biggest tumors the fastest, okay? And we can keep weaponizing this until we have something that we can inject into somebody and they will die of cancer. But as we all know, you can't give anybody cancer, so we won't be blamed for it. All right, so that's the idea. And so what happens at this point, we're now, the Cuban Missile Crisis was October of 62. In the spring of 1963, there is this young woman down at the University of Florida. Her name is Judy. And Judy is an unusual girl in the sense that when she was a young teenager, she watched her grandmother die of cancer. And she decided that she wanted to be the person to find the cure for cancer. So even when she was in high school, she was doing all these cancer experiments. And by the time she was a senior, she was giving cancer to mice in 7 days. Now, what's remarkable about this, and she's using radiation and all kind of stuff to do it, what's remarkable about this is faster than they're able to do it at the National Cancer Institute. And so in March of 1961, Judy goes and crashes the press conference for the American Cancer Society, which is being held right up the road from where she lives, about 20 miles up the road. And armed with her high school press pass, she goes up and crashes the press conference, and she brings all of her notes with her. Well, they're getting ready to kick her out. And then somebody said, well, wait a second, who is this girl? We've never had anybody try to crash one of these things before. What's up with this? And she says, well, I've got this information I need to share with you. And they let her stay. And at lunch, they take a look at her notes, and they realize, they say, if what you say is true, you're outperforming NCI. Okay? She said, well, my lab's right down the road. Why don't you guys come and look at it? And she makes this claim to the man who is the senior vice president for research of the American Cancer Society and had previously been the dean of the University of Minnesota Medical School. And he picks up the telephone and calls his buddy, Dr. Alton Ochsner, who had been president of the American Cancer Society a couple years before, and said, Alton, get down here. You need to meet this gal. This is important. He said, well, I'll be down on Sunday. So on Sunday, Alton Ochsner flies down with this other old man, and they're both in baggy gray suits. And on Monday morning, the three of them, Dr. Deal, Dr. Ochsner, and this third guy get in a car, and they go to Judy's high school to check out her lab. And they get there and they look at it and they say, well, you are doing what you said you were doing. There's no question you're doing real science here. This is also the most dangerous thing we've ever seen. I mean, you are dealing with cancer-causing viruses in a high school, in a dirt floor laboratory with no security. Okay? So we're shutting down your laboratory. But you, young lady, are coming with us. Because we need to train you properly. And this is, like spring of 1961, the moment she graduates, she is sent up to, at their expense, up to Roswell Park Cancer Institute in Buffalo, New York, to be trained. And she spends the summer up there working in the director's laboratory. And they train her how to handle cancer-causing viruses. Okay, so we're now in the beginning of 1963. The telephone rings at the University of Florida. Judy's telephone rings, and it's Dr. Oshner, who says, Judy, how would you like to skip the last 2 years of college? You can start medical school in the fall. We'll pay your tuition, your room and board. We'll give you a stipend. There's just one little thing that we need you to do this summer in New Orleans. And if you agree to do it, you'll be working under the direction of that famous cancer researcher, Dr. Mary Sherman. So, I mean, what do you think Judy says? This is the dream job. This is finally the ticket for her to become an official cancer researcher with all the proper credentials and everything else, and to have somebody else pay for it. So she, of course, says, yes, I'll be there. Okay? So they send her a bus ticket, and she comes to New Orleans. She's a little bit early, about 2 weeks early. Starts shooting off her mouth, as you might expect a 19-year-old girl to do, about all of her cancer research and everything else. And Oshner's out of town, and Mary Sherman's out of town. But she contacts their offices, and they go, oh, my God, we got to get somebody in there to shut her up, to show her where she's going to be living, to get her to her cover job, because they've got all this set up for her this summer, because they're going to make a biological weapon, and they need her skill set to stand there and do it. Okay? So at that point in time, they send in a ex-Marine with intelligence training who is from New Orleans originally to become her bodyguard and babysitter, and that ex-Marine's name is Lee Harvey Oswald. So this is how, who, if you don't know, some of your listeners might not recognize the name, he is the guy that the United States government eventually blames for the assassination of President Kennedy. Okay? Well, but Judy was the resource they needed. Okay? Oswald was her handler, her bodyguard, her helper. So he sets her up in her cover job. They both start at the Riley Coffee Company on the same day, May 10th. Okay? He gets her sets her up in an apartment right off of Magazine Street. His apartment is on Magazine Street. He gets it the same week. Okay? They get on the Magazine Street bus and they ride it together to Riley Coffee Company, which is on Magazine Street. Okay? So this is all set up so they can come and go. And the whole point of this coverage, these cover jobs at the Riley Coffee Company, is they're going to be sneaking out when they're on the clock, going over to David Ferry's apartment to do this biological weapon.
He's an interesting character, David Ferry. He's not a doctor or anything. From what I know, wasn't he a priest? But he was sort of. Didn't he commit an offence against a boy or something like that? It's difficult to understand how David Ferry goes from, priest to, being involved in weaponized cancer viruses.
Well, David, there's unfortunately a long tradition now of priests doing things they should not do. And particularly with young boys, okay? David Ferry started out trying to become a Jesuit. Hardly ever gets mentioned. The Jesuits are good about keeping their name out of his conversation. Mm-hmm. And but there's something he's got a screw loose, and the Jesuits see it. Okay, this is before he really starts in with the teenage boys, and they kick him out. And then he gets involved with the Civil Air Patrol to, again, another excuse to teach teenage boys. And he gets kicked out of that because he takes some of these teenage boys to a house of prostitution. Then he relocates down to New Orleans. He's a very good pilot. never been in the military, but very. He's a very smart guy. He speaks many languages, and he becomes a big jet pilot. Big 4-engine jets for United Airlines, which is headquartered in Miami. Mm-hmm. And he does that until he decides to take a teenage boy on a flight on an airplane at night, and they're buzzing the city of New Orleans at treetop level. And when he gets back to the airport, the FAA, the Federal Aeronautics Administration, is waiting for him, and they pull his license. Okay. Well, throughout all this, Ferry was very smart and felt that he could, get rid of communism and cure cancer and do all these things. He had a very large self-image, whatever. But he winds up, because he now no longer has a job, he falls into the hands of the mafia in New Orleans, and he starts flying Carlos Marcello, the mafia boss, around. And the Cubans come in, and the CIA's there with the anti-Castro Cubans, and he volunteers to fly missions into Cuba. Okay, well, this guy is able to land in jungle clearings at night. He is a top-notch pilot whose skill set is absolutely perfect for this anti-Castro warfare. And so he's in the middle of doing all this when they decide to weaponize these cancer viruses, and they need safe houses to do this stuff in. And there's a house. He lives on Louisiana Avenue Parkway, which is a little shady suburban place. You never suspect anything in there. And the house across the street is where they have these 2,000 mice in cages. And so what's happening is they're taking these test tubes full of the cancer-causing virus. They're exposing them to radiation, taking them over to what we call the mouse house, injecting them into the mice, waiting for the cancer tumors to grow. And then they got these 2 Cubans over there taking care of the mice. They throw 50, 60 of these mice into a cardboard box, bring it over to David Ferry's apartment, and that's when Judy and Lee Oswald show up, and they kill the mice with formalin, and they cut the mice open, and they cut out the tumors, and they throw the tumors in a blender and grind them up, and they're looking for the big tumors, the fastest growing ones. And then Judy, because she's been trained at all this, she makes the microscope slides, puts everything into test tubes, properly labels it, and then she cleans up David Ferry's kitchen to laboratory standards, hides all the equipment in the cupboards. It looks like a normal kitchen now. And they leave, and they go back to the Riley Coffee Company. And they're still on the clock. Okay? So they've got a whole alibi system already set up for where they are. At any rate, so this is what they're doing in the summer of 1963. So, guys, is this a good time for y'all to play a couple of songs and talk about it amongst yourselves? And I'll be back to finish this thing here in a minute.
That's absolutely fine with us, Ed. Yeah, we normally play a break about this time. So we'll be back shortly, folks. Thank you.
Never happens like in the movie. You always break my heart, you see. And every time I see your eyes are smiling, ooh, baby, breaking me, yeah. We're breaking free, yeah. We're breaking free, yeah. These lonely winter nights, they chill me to the bone, yeah. I called you 50 times, but you're not home, no, no. I feel so low, I feel so blue. I'm many nights and I'm alone with you, yeah. It never happens like in the movie. You always break my heart, you see. And every time I see your eyes are smiling, ooh, baby, breaking me, yeah. We're breaking free, yeah. We're breaking free, yeah. We're breaking free, yeah. We're breaking free, yeah. Thanks very much.
You're listening to RaconteursNews.com. Stay tuned for more untwisted, unsweetened news. Please consider buying a t-shirt or making a donation to help support us. Thank you for your support. We do it for us all.
And welcome back to Raconteurs News. And we're absolutely blown away by our guest tonight, Ed Haslam. He really knows his stuff, and he's been answering a few questions. But if you'd like to carry on, Ed, we're all ears, mate.
Okay, well, we were talking about this work, developing, weaponizing the biological weapon, which was going on in David Ferrie's apartment. Uh-huh. And when Judy gets finished cleaning everything up, she takes this, puts it all in a lunchbox, and she goes over to Mary Sherman's apartment. And she actually has a key to Mary Sherman's apartment where she can let herself in, drop the lunchbox off. Sometimes she stays and reads for a while. And then she goes back to the Riley Coffee Company, where both she and Lee Oswald work. Now, much of, I am the author of Dr. Mary's Monkey, but I also helped my publisher put together Judith Very Baker's book. This is the Judy I'm talking about, which is called Me and Lee. Yeah. How I Came to Know, Love, and Lose Lee Harvey Oswald. And much of what I'm about to tell you is actually in that book. Now, there's some overlap in the books, but a lot of the detail of it is in that book. Because what they're doing here, this is a loop. Every time they're finished with getting these big tumors out, they take it back and give it more radiation to make the monster bigger. Okay?
Whoa. And
then they send it back to the mice, get new tumors, kill the mice, and so this is a loop. And so they're weaponizing this cancer-causing virus, and they know it kills the mice. They kill about 2,000 mice in the process, and then they start testing it on monkeys. And the first monkeys they use are Western Hemisphere monkeys called marmosets from South America. And they're cheaper and easier to get. And then after they kill the marmosets, they start testing them on African green monkeys, which are more expensive. But Tulane, remember, Tulane Medical School's right here, they run a primate research lab, a monkey lab. Okay? So they've got African green monkeys there. Yeah. And it starts killing the African green monkeys. Then they have one final test. They need to know if it'll kill a human.
Oh, yeah.
Now, where do you get a human you can kill and nobody's going to notice? No, death row at a penitentiary is a good idea. Mm-hmm. And they got a penitentiary up in southeast Louisiana that the universities work with a lot, testing things on humans illegally, but they do it anyway. And so Angola Penitentiary is up there, and they, quote, get some volunteers from death row on Angola Penitentiary, and they're going to bring them from the penitentiary over to this mental hospital and inject them. Okay? Well, this mental hospital is not a simple mental hospital. This is a hospital for the criminally insane. And because of that, it's got guards at the gate. It's got barbed wire fences around it. It's got a lot of security. You don't just walk into this place. You have to go past the guards. All right? So they got to get the prisoner in there, and they have to get the biological weapon in there, and they have to get the people that are going to inject the biological weapon into the prisoner to see if it works. And they actually arranged to get a Cuban because they're trying to figure out if this thing will kill Fidel Castro. So why not get a Cuban to test it on? All right? So this mental hospital is in a small town called Jackson, Louisiana. This is not Jackson, Mississippi, which is a fairly large city. This is a little tiny town called Jackson, Louisiana. And they drive, and by they, I mean they drive in this black Cadillac up from New Orleans to Jackson, but they don't want to wait in Jackson because they got this big black Cadillac, and this is, everybody else in town's got pickup trucks, So they drive down the road to the courthouse, and they're going to wait in front of the courthouse because, they'll be less noticed in a black Cadillac in front of the courthouse. And they're going to wait there for the phone to ring, and it's a pay phone, and the phone's going to ring when the prisoner leaves the penitentiary, leaves Angola Penitentiary. As it drives down the road, it's only about a half hour away, they will then go out and wait by the highway for the van to come by, and they'll get on the highway behind the van, so they arrive at the mental hospital like a convoy. Okay, and they'll all get waved in together. All right, so and this is 4 hours north of New Orleans. So you got to drive 4 hours north and 4 hours south. That's 8 hours of drive time, plus you got couple hours of time up there. All right, so they get up to Jackson, drive over to this other town called Clinton, and they're expecting, where they're going to wait for the phone call, and this is August, hot August afternoon in Louisiana. They're expecting the square in front of the courthouse to be empty because nobody sits out in the sun in August in New Orleans, So what's really going on, and they didn't anticipate, was the day they've chosen to do this is August 29th. What they didn't realize was that on August 28th, the day before, Reverend Martin Luther King gave his I Have a Dream speech in Washington, D.C., and he was, of course, a black civil rights leader. And this was during the the summer of civil rights unrest in America. And the South, where this town was famous for having segregation and not allowing blacks to vote and all this. So an organization out of Chicago, one of the northern cities, had said, well, we're going to have a black voter registration drive the following day in order to surf on the momentum of Dr. King's speech. Okay? So here's the scene in front of this courthouse. You've got a line of blacks waiting to register to vote. The other side of the square, you got a bunch of angry whites with their arms crossed, standing there in the shade, not liking what they're seeing. And in the middle, you've got the town marshal, hoping there's not going to be trouble. Into this scene drives this black Cadillac. Well, the marshal looks at this and, oh, Joe, you know who these guys are? You know, he goes on over there and pulls his badge and says, may I see your ID and, driver's license and registration, please? And the guy says, sure, I am Clay Shaw from the International Trade Mart. Well, if you saw the Oliver Stone movie on JFK, you'll know that Clay Shaw is the guy he arrested.
Yeah, he was played by Tommy Lee Jones, wasn't he?
That's right. That's right. And they the center of Garrison's case, the main thing he had on Shaw was they had connected him to Lee Harvey Oswald. Okay. Well, and Shaw said, well, I never knew Oswald, blah, blah, blah. But this black Cadillac, the door opens and this young white kid gets out, 23-year-old white guy, gets out of the black Cadillac, and he goes and gets in line with the blacks to try to register to vote. And he's wondering if they'll let him register just because he's white, even though he doesn't even live in the area. And he waits in line, and he signs the ledger to register to vote, and he signs in his name, Lee Harvey Oswald. Okay, so we've got this one car that's got Clay Shaw driving it, Lee Harvey Oswald in the back seat, this guy with his funny orange wig and painted on eyebrows, that's David Ferry, in case you don't recognize him. And they've got a guy who's like works in the mental hospital in the uniform in the back seat. So when he gets to the front gate, they'll all get waved in together. Okay? And we know about this because in the 1970s, when the American Congress finally decided to take a look for themselves at the Kennedy assassination, they called up the town marshal from this town in Louisiana to come to Washington, D.C. to talk to them. And when they found out what he was going to say, they took his testimony in secret and did not tell the American people that they knew that Clay Shaw was connected to Lee Harvey Oswald. They kept it an official secret, kept it from the American people for 16 years, and that information did not get released until after Oliver Stone's movie triggered the JFK Records Act. Okay, so this happens on August 29th. The phone finally rings. They go out on the highway. They meet these people, and they follow them onto the grounds of the mental hospital. The patient gets put in there. They inject the patient. The patient's basically handcuffed to a bed here. But they inject the patient with the cancer, and now they have to wait 48 hours to see if it works. And the way you see if it works is you got a special blood test. Well, nowadays, these blood tests are all over the place. But back in '63, there were only a handful of people in the United States that knew how to do them. And one of them was Judith Ferry Baker, because she had been trained how to do these blood tests up in Buffalo, New York. And so she is driven from New Orleans, again, 4 hours north, to the mental hospital by Lee Oswald. and Lee Oswald is seen up there with a woman in the front seat of his car. And when Garrison starts investigating this, they start saying, well, that must be Marina, Oswald's wife. Well, they go and ask Marina, and she said, no, that wasn't me. I never went up there. Somebody else. So Garrison's trial ends with the statement by his assistant DA that says, we know there's a woman working with Oswald traveling around southeast Louisiana up by this mental hospital for some reason. We don't know who she is. We wish we could bring her into the courtroom. Well, that person is Judith Very Baker. And at the time of the Garrison trial, she was living in Mexico with her husband, who was an American geologist out there, down there looking for oil. So, what you've got is you've got Lee Oswald, who the American government has told us is a loner and a communist, working with a team of people to develop a biological weapon to kill a communist dictator. All right? So, A, he's not alone. B, he's not a communist. Okay? And he's doing this on a day-to-day basis out of a cover job at the Riley Coffee Company and is hired there by an ex-FBI agent. So this is looking more and more and more like an intelligence operation. And so what we find with Oswald is he is working as part of this Operation Mongoose. And Mongoose is customizing all these weapons so they have silenced machine guns and silenced rifles for assassinations and all this stuff. And they're arming these Cuban groups for raids on Cuba, anti-Castro raids on Cuba in New Orleans. And they are trying, Oswald's handlers have this idea that they're going to have him go to Mexico and bring the biological weapon down to Mexico and hand it off to some CIA contacts to get it into Cuba. And to do this, they want to make him look like a communist. And so they have him start handing out these fair play for Cuba leaflets and stuff like that. And so he's trying to infiltrate these groups and stuff. But so Oswald, what happens with this thing he drives Judy up there on August 31st. Well, Judy was trying to find a cure for cancer. She didn't sign up to murder people. And she doesn't like the idea that, she's been what all of her work has led to these people being murdered in this mental hospital with this biological weapon. So she writes a letter of protest to Dr. Oshner. Well, this is serious intelligence operations, guys, and you don't write stuff down. They don't want anything on paper.
No.
They want it all verbally and all this stuff. And Oshner is furious. I mean, he literally tells her, you're lucky you're leaving New Orleans with your teeth in your mouth. Okay? And he says, you're not going to medical school in the fall. He reneges on his offer. And she has to go back to Florida with her husband, who she really doesn't like very much. But they go back there, and David Ferry is aware that Judy and Lee have a lot of affection for each other, and that has developed over the summer. And he arranges for them to stay in contact over the telephone lines with no paper trail because of his involvement with the mafia and the sports betting thing. They've got a way of making long-distance phone calls without leaving a paper trail. Mm-hmm. So Judy is able to talk to Lee while he is in Dallas. He goes to Mexico in September and goes back to Dallas. And Lee has figured out that these guys are going to kill President Kennedy. And he actually tells Judy this on July 29th. He says, look, these guys are going to kill Kennedy, and based on what they've asked me to do in New Orleans in August, it looks like they're setting me up to be the patsy. Okay, so the noose is getting tighter and tighter on Lee throughout the fall. And At any rate,
So,
Judy.
so Lee knew he was going to be set up for the assassination.
Yes.
Well,
And there wasn't anything he could do because these people play really rough.
Yeah.
And Lee was married and he had 2 little daughters. And he was afraid that if he did anything to bolt out of the situation, that they would kill his wife and daughters. And so he was stuck, you know. And in fact, there are some efforts that were obviously made to alert people to the fact that there was going to be an assassination in Dallas. And one of those came from an informant named Lee. And so, you know, there's a very realistic scenario there that Lee was trying to pass word back to the appropriate people in charge of the president's security that there was going to be an assassination attempt in Dallas on November 22nd. And of course, you know, what you have to ask at this point is, I mean, Lee had penetrated the plot. He had seen the faces. He knew a lot of the names, you know, and he knew all about this biological weapon being done for the CIA and the mafia. Imagine what he could have said if he got into a courtroom alive.
Oh, yeah.
Mm.
All right. And once you get your head around that one, now you can see why they shot him on Sunday morning.
Uh-huh. Yeah, Babushka's just commented in the chat room. She says, I find it very strange that Lee is allowed to go to Russia, live there for a few years, and then is allowed back, and this is the Cold War, which is a bit of a puzzle in itself, isn't it?
Even his wife was Russian, weren't she, Marina?
Mm.
Well, you know, Lee was asked once on the radio about, quote, his defection to the Soviet Union. And he said, if I defected, why did they let me back? The point is, he never defected in the first place. He was sent over there on an intelligence operation to try to penetrate inside the Soviet Union to get intelligence. All right. And when he finally comes back, all the newspapers up in the East Coast, Washington Post and all these things, had all said he defected. Right? Well, did he defect or not? Well, in the structure of the United States government, there is one officer who has the authority to say whether or not you defected. And that is the Attorney General. And when Lee Oswald comes back to the United States, the Attorney General is Robert Kennedy. It is Bobby Kennedy that lets Lee Oswald back in the United States.
Wow.
Do you think Bobby got a payback from Lee for that? You know, as you would imagine, the Kennedy brothers would make sure they got their side of the deal. Okay. I think what happened here is he let Lee back in the United States so Lee could spy for him.
Yeah.
On all this stuff going on in the CIA with these Cubans. Now, once you realize that, if you're gonna go shoot the president of the United States through the head with a high-powered rifle in broad daylight, you got to spend a little bit of time thinking about what you're going to do about his brother, because his brother's the Attorney General, and he's got the resources and the authority to come after you.
Yeah.
And if you frame one of Bobby Kennedy's spies, assets, underground agents, which is what Lee Oswald was. If you frame Bobby Kennedy's man as the shooter, then Bobby can't come in and say, hey, Lee's cool, he was with me. Because J. Edgar Hoover's standing right there, ready to say, if Lee's with you, you just killed your brother, you ambitious little bastard.
Yeah.
Which is why I find it so interesting that when Mary Sherman was murdered, it happened to be the day the Warren Commission came to New Orleans and started their investigation into Lee Oswald. And a week later, there's a memo sent from J. Edgar Hoover to the special agent in charge of the New Orleans office of the FBI, telling him, do not investigate the Mary Sherman murder on pain of reprimand.
That's incredible. It really is incredible. And the links and the strings. I mean, there's so many different facets to this story. You know, from the polio, the cancer viruses, then using the cancer viruses, even right back to penicillin. It's a absolutely compelling story, and just real history is so much better than the crap that you get taught. You know, that's sort of mainstream. When you really get into real history, it really does. It comes to life.
Well, now you can see why they didn't tell the public that Mary Sherman's arm was burned off. I mean, this is the main fact on the case, and they never told the public because they didn't want people going around uptown New Orleans looking for the machine that burned off her arm.
Yeah.
I mean, it's part of the cover-up.
We have got another question coming in. It's slightly off topic, but I wonder if I could just slot it in here, Ed. Mithrin's asking, does the guest give any credence to the idea that Officer Tibbet was a JFK lookalike?
No, but Officer Tippett was not killed by Oswald. In my opinion, Oswald didn't kill anybody on November 22nd. No. Tippett was shot with a semi-automatic pistol. Oswald was arrested with a revolver on him. They're totally different types of guns. They leave different marks on the ammunition and stuff. And Oswald was actually already in the Texas theater at the time Tippett was killed. And they had what's known as a doppelganger, a look-alike. Remember, during World War II, they used to use one on Winston Churchill to fake people out on where he was and stuff. Well, they had a look-alike on Oswald. And he actually goes to the Texas theater and leads the police there when the real Oswald is already in the theater downstairs. And the real Oswald gets arrested downstairs and taken out the front door. The fake Oswald gets arrested upstairs and taken out the back door. And let him go. All right.
So that's why we get the stories of the multiple Oswalds. Yeah.
Yeah, and then there are other issues like 3 of the police officers in the Texas School Book Depository signed affidavits saying that the rifle they found there was a Mauser, a 7.65 millimeter Mauser. And of course, the FBI shows up with this Italian Mannlicher Carcano, which is not the rifle they found, right? But they switched the rifles, And so there's a lot of, the more you get into it, the more problems you see. But the really big issue is the fact that it was the Dallas police who had the responsibility of moving Oswald from the police station over to the courthouse so he could be tried on Sunday morning, right? Mm-hmm. Well, the police in question, they've interviewed these guys and said, we wanted to do it in the middle of the night, Saturday night, when nobody was around. Nobody would see us. We'd put him in a car and, out the side door and take him over there. But we got a phone call from the White House telling us that we had to take him out the front door at 10 o'clock in the morning.
So would that call
10 o'clock.
Would that call be from Johnson then?
Well, one of Johnson's henchmen.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I mean, not Johnson himself making the call, but a fellow by the name of Clark Clifford, or Clifford. At any rate, but the instructions are, we want the cameras there, and Now, if you look at the killing of Oswald, what you realize is that Jack Ruby, who shot Oswald, was not standing in the crowd. He arrived at the back of the crowd about 5 seconds before Oswald came out the door.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm. They were an hour and a half late. They were waiting for Jack Ruby. And they had all of the lights on. It's going to blind everybody, and all the police officers coming out of the building facing these TV cameras. Everybody's looking at Oswald. Where's Oswald? Where's Oswald? And Ruby comes walking down the the driveway, and he arrives at the crowd at the exact moment Oswald comes out. And when you watch the raw footage on this, it's kind of interesting. You actually see about 90 seconds before this happens, there's some guy from the crowd holding a wind-up movie camera who runs into the police station and then comes right back out. Like he's saying, Ruby's here, showtime, 90 seconds.
Yeah.
Okay? And that is the cue for Oswald to come out. And the moment Oswald comes out is the moment Ruby gets there and kills him. And it turns out, all this stuff about Ruby being a lone nut, Ruby knew Oswald since Oswald was a kid. Oswald was from the New Orleans Mafia. He used to go over to Carlos Marcello's house and have lunch. Mm-hmm. Okay? There's even a scene where he takes Judy over to the 500 Club to meet Marcello. Okay? Now, and once you realize that Ruby ran a strip club and Marcello ran a strip club and they used to trade strippers, then you realize that all these people are all connected.
Yeah.
And what happened with, it was the mafia that ran the casinos in Havana before Castro. So when Castro took over and confiscated the casinos and the hotels, the mafia was furious. He stole millions of dollars from the mafia. Meyer Lansky, who ran the casinos, put out $1 million cash contract on anybody that could kill Castro. Okay, and it was because of that the CIA said, well, look, we've got a common interest here with the mafia. We all want Castro dead. And that's when they set up Operation Mongoose for the explicit purpose of killing Fidel Castro. And Oswald was part of that. Chauncey Holt was part of that. We've been able to identify a bunch of the people in the photographs with Oswald now.
And Clay Shaw was part of that as well, weren't he? I mean, he was brought to trial. But I do remember, I think, did I read that Jim Garrison said that David Ferry was the only one that ever showed any remorse about it?
Yeah, he did say that. And the thing with Garrison, and I think I can get into this without losing everybody. One of the guys in Mongoose was a pilot who was a weapons expert, and he was involved in customizing all these weapons for the Cubans, right? And he was out of California, and so he flies into New Orleans with some other CIA people in August of 1963, and he meets with Guy Bannister, who's Oswald's handler, and he goes into a meeting in the International Trade Mart with Clay Shaw's boss, Lloyd Cobb. Right? Now, this is when the International Trade Mart was founded, the CIA knew it was going to be a great place for them to have people inside of because they were busy doing international trade all the time. Okay? And Lloyd Cobb was the founder. He was Clay Shaw's boss. And so what you have is Chauncey Holt, this guy I'm telling you that was modifying the weapons and flying stuff around. He is in the International Trade Mart having a meeting with Clay Shaw's boss about these weapons. And when he comes out of the building, coming out of the front door, he doesn't know that Oswald's standing out there passing out Fair Play for Cuba leaflets with cameras rolling. And they actually get photographs of Chauncey Holt coming out of the building with Lee Oswald standing there. And Chauncey, before he dies, identifies the other CIA people in the photo. So, this whole thing about Oswald being a lone nut is malarkey. He was an intelligence agent. He was working with the anti-Castro Cubans down there, doing various things. He was also spying for Bobby Kennedy. He was involved in there was a raid on, and this is shown in the Oliver Stone movie, where they raid the camp across the lake and confiscate all the weapons. Well, it's Oswald who tells them where the camp is. So he's double, triple agent work in this, and he's getting into really deep water. He's getting very afraid he's going to get beat up or killed or something like that. And so that's kind of what happens here. And I was telling you about this memo from J. Edgar Hoover. On page 2 of the memo, a lot of the documents I have Hoover signed himself, but this one, Hoover must have been out of town and dictated it over the phone because he didn't sign it, but it's from his office. It's clearly from him. It says director of the FBI. And after telling his agents do not investigate the Mary Sherman murder, on page 2 of this document, and this is in my book, in the new hard copy book with the crime scene photos, this document on page 2, there's a note that says Mary Sherman, 51 years old, internationally respected cancer researcher, blah, 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 arm and rib cage completely burned away. Next sentence. Somebody's name was found in her address book. Well, of course, that's where you put names. But this name is redacted, and it's 6 letters long, and there's no first name. Whoever this is, the head of the FBI is going to know this guy by his last name. And I think it's Oswald, because I have 2 witnesses who saw Oswald in Mary Sherman's apartment building. One of whom was with Oswald in Mary Sherman's apartment and said that Mary Sherman telephoned Oswald. Well, if Mary Sherman telephoned Oswald, then she would have his phone number in her address book. Okay? Yeah. So I contact the FBI and say, hey, guys, I know you're busy, but, I'd like one word, please. 50-year-old memo. I want one word. And the FBI said, we're not telling you. Appeal to the Department of Justice. And so I do all the forms that I appeal to the Department of Justice. And the Department of Justice says, we don't have to tell you, and we're not going to tell you. So these people know what that word is. And they are unwilling to tell the American people that word. And then we've got another thing that happens. This happens the week my book comes out in 2007. The director of the Central Intelligence Agency at the time is Michael Hayden, an Air Force general. And he's trying to set a new tone at the CIA, right? And he says, well, it's time to open the kimono. We're going to tell you about all the secrets that we had back in the 1950s, okay? And so he presents this list. And the name of this document is called the Family Jewels. This is the CIA's name for it, not mine, right? This is CIA called it the Family Jewels, right? And there were 8 jewels in there, and there's a summary with the 8 little things, and then there is the detail, and they tell you what number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 are, but they will not tell you a single word about jewel number 1, and the time frame of this document happens to be exactly the same as the time frame of my book, Dr. Mary's Monkey. So what did they do? I mean, is it they don't want to say? We found that millions of dollars of laundered money was spent installing a linear particle accelerator in New Orleans so that the government could conduct secret research because we realized that there was a cancer-causing virus in the polio vaccine, and we didn't want to tell the people.
Wow.
Incredible.
It is absolutely amazing how this story just seems to be woven throughout your life, Ed. When I first started reading the book, I thought I'm really interested to know how Ed got onto this story, but it was around you from your school days, wasn't it?
Well, you said it at the top of the show. The story came to me, and I didn't want to be the messenger on this. I tried to get somebody else to write it. I said, look, I'll help you with the research. I'll give you the backgrounds, blah, blah, blah. But nobody would touch it. And I finally said, well, either I do this or it does not get done.
Yeah.
And when I realized the dimensions of the cancer epidemic that resulted from the contamination of the polio vaccine, I just said, my hand is being forced by this. This is my cross. I will bear it. I just have to do this because the world needs to know.
One thing that kept going through my mind when I was reading the book, you worked at the time that you wrote the book as an advertising executive. It made me wonder, how has this affected your career, and what kind of comebacks have you had as a result of writing the book?
Well, basically, after I got finished advertising, I started teaching, and once people found out I had this book out there, then for some reason they didn't want me teaching there any longer and stuff. So nobody comes out and says anything about connecting A to B, because they don't want to be liable for it. But it's been a challenge, and frankly there are and have been some very serious security concerns on my point from this, because I'm up against awfully powerful, awfully mean, nasty people. And as my father said to me, and it's in the book, he warned me about doing this. He said, you're going to be crossing swords with the most powerful people in this country if you do this story. So, I had to make a go, no-go decision on it. Fortunately, it's worked out okay. I'm a guy with a family and stuff like that, so I had to think about them too.
Of course, yeah.
So, at any rate, that's where we are, and it's been 20 years since I came out with the story originally. We've upgraded it, and this Judy woman was brought to me by 60 Minutes. I knew her name from before, but I didn't know that I was ever going to find her.
No, that was quite a find.
Yeah.
We have got loads of questions coming at you from the chat room. Mithrin's asking again, is there any evidence at all that the vaccine was in fact always intended to be lethal, i.e. deliberately contaminated?
Well, you can't really answer that one properly. I say my answer to that is I don't think it was intentional. I think it was a hasty public health decision, and the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Yeah. And this one turned out to be a really bad idea. Now that I see, in the Daily Mail in the UK this week, they on the front page were talking about how the World Health Organization is ordering 150 countries to remove and replace their current polio vaccine due to a problem. This is 2016. This stuff has not gone away, and the fact, as far as I'm concerned, the whole polio epidemic in the first place was avoidable and treatable.
Yeah.
And we didn't need all this vaccine stuff. It's, money talks, unfortunately. The pharmaceuticals are way more concerned about wealth than they are about health, and it's a structural problem with the way our country is set up,
Yeah, we've got.
I wish it was different.
We've got exactly the same problem here. I know Lee mentioned way back in the chat room that the first tests that were done that showed that vitamin C cured cancer, polio, and a great long list of other things were done back in 1940. So that information was already available then.
That's right, and I have a blog on my website. My website, by the way, is drmarysmonkey.com, but spell out doctor. But I have a whole section on the vitamin C treatment of polio, and it's if what was reported was accurate, it was a complete cure, and he presented that information. But the problem is, at these medical conferences, the agendas and the speakers and what gets published and everything else is all being controlled by the money. And a patient cured is a customer lost, and they wanted the whole vaccine industry to develop. And they're talking about, hundreds of millions of doses of stuff. There's a lot of money involved in this stuff. And I mean, the amount of vaccines that an American child is required to get today by the age of 5 is absolutely ridiculous. I remember when the Soviet Union broke apart, and first time we were able to get media in there, reporters in there to interview Soviet scientists and stuff. And so this guy is talking to the Soviet scientists about biological weapons. All right. And at one point, the American reporter, and these guys are all $30 haircuts on $3 heads. Right? I don't have a lot of good stuff to say about it. But he says to the Russian scientists, he says, but we could just make a vaccine against all that stuff. And the Russian laughed at him and he said, if you made a vaccine against everything that was in our arsenal, we wouldn't need to use the arsenal.
That says an awful lot. Yeah.
It does, yeah.
We've got another question here, Ed, from Unique Lee, and he says, did Ed compile any research into HIV-1 before he came across this strange connection with cancer viruses and using monkey tissue?
The answer to that is yes. And when you start talking about AIDS, I accept the position that AIDS is caused by HIV-1, and HIV-1 is a mutated monkey virus. And the ancestor is SIV, the simian immunodeficiency virus, which is native to the African green monkey. The problem was they put the African green monkey in the same cage with the rhesus monkey, and they got cross-infected. So when they made the polio vaccine, not only did they have SV40 in there, remember 40 means they found 39 other ones first, okay?
Yeah.
They not only had SV40 in there, but they also had SIV, the simian immunodeficiency virus. Now, I do not think that HIV was in the polio vaccine, all right? That's a different issue, but SIV was in there. Yeah. So when they started, and you talk to people who know what they're talking about, geneticists and stuff, they will tell you that the RNA of HIV-1 was somehow mangled. Things were rearranged. Somehow there's evidence of the use of force, essentially, on that. So if you take a test tube that's got the polio vaccine in it with the SV40 and the SIV, and you start shooting gamma ray radiation through it, and you hit the SIV, you're going to mangle it. And in my opinion, that's a very reasonable, hardball, scientific explanation that could explain why HIV popped up so suddenly.
Yeah, because the stories were told as to why it did pop up, they really don't stack up, do they?
No, they don't. And, the Africans have been eating monkeys and chimpanzees and stuff like that for centuries, maybe millennium, okay? There's no sudden exposure there that would have created it. And, what happened when in the 90s, Scientific American, which is a very nice magazine, did a special book on AIDS called The Science of AIDS. And they got guys from Harvard and stuff who were epidemiologists to look at the data and do the math regressions graphs backwards. And they all said case 1 is 1960-61, which is right when the particle accelerator was at work in New Orleans at the Public Health Service Hospital. And it was after that all of a sudden you started having these stories like the Manchester seaman show up in 1959 and claims he had AIDS. And, well, he didn't have AIDS, and they finally proved it, and they finally backed off from the story. But, the big print giveth the lie, the little print taketh away, okay? So they tell you on page 1 what they want you to believe, and then they 2 weeks later tell you on page 25 what the real truth was, if they tell you at all.
Yeah.
Anyway, of all the lists they have out there on where AIDS might have come from, I really think that this exposure to gamma ray radiation during a virus research project really should be on the list. It matches the timeline, the technology fits, and all the pieces fit together.
Yeah, I mean, some people will be listening to this interview and thinking, wow, I don't need to buy his book. He's really covered it well. But for anyone who's found this conversation with you fascinating, I would urge them to buy and read the book, because it absolutely blew me away, and that there is so much more detail in that you can't possibly cover in a 2-hour interview, isn't there?
That's right. This is a top-line interview, basically. And the same goes for the book Me and Lee. I mean, my book is 400 pages with the crime scene photos, and Judith's book is 600 pages. That's 1,000 pages of real information about exactly what happened. And, I mean, my book on audio tape is 10 hours, and her book is 20 hours. It's 30 hours. Just to get through it. And so in a 2-hour interview, I'm happy to do the interview, give you a top line on it, but there's way more to this than I can get into in a radio interview.
Yeah, absolutely. It gripped me, and I'm not the most voracious of readers, but it was something that I did find that I really wanted to get to the end to. So it probably took me about a week to read. If someone's a particularly good, fast reader, they'd probably get through it in a couple of days. But, Well, one of the things that fast readers have to watch out for is if you read it really fast, you don't get it all. You're going to have to go back and read it a second time. I've had a number of people, read it and say, I had to stop for a couple of days just to kind of digest what you were talking about. Yeah.
When we were editing it, we set it up in 20-page chapters so that you could read one chapter a night and think it through, and there's lots of footnotes. I mean, it's footnoted like a master's thesis, So as you're reading it, if you say, where's this guy getting all this information from? You got to stop and read the footnotes,
Mm-hmm.
And,
we last week we had an American radio host, Chuck O'Celli, on, and I mentioned who was coming on next week at the end of the show, and he said, he said, I can thoroughly recommend, if you can get hold of a copy, to read Ed's earlier book. Wasn't that called Mary, Ferry and the Monkey?
Mary, Ferry and the Monkey Virus. And really that book is Dr. Mary's Monkey is an expansion of that book. Okay. So unless you just happen to be a book collector, there's no real reason to, they sell it used, but it's really expensive.
I had a look the other day on Amazon. It's
hundreds of dollars,
Yeah.
And it's not necessary to really get to appreciate the story.
Yeah, I looked the other day after Chuck mentioned that, and I think the cheapest copy I could find on Amazon was $180. So,
yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. The other thing is, because of Amazon, and it's available in Kindle all over the world. It's Amazon Japan, Amazon Australia, Amazon India. It's in Canada, and of course, Amazon UK. You can get the hard copies as well as the. I don't know if you can get the audio in the UK, but they do have it on audio book as well as Kindle, and stuff. So, and it's being translated into Chinese this year.
Wow.
So, the cat's out of the bag. Regardless of where you live in the world, you can probably find it. Just, get online and start looking for Dr. Mary's Monkey.
Yeah, I did put the link in the chat room earlier on. I will put the links to your website and to the Amazon page for your book when we put the podcast up for anyone who missed the show live. Unless you've got anything else you'd like to add to that, Ed, I'd just really like to thank you for coming on and speaking to us tonight.
Well, you're welcome. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you and your audience. It's a whole nother part of the world that I don't get a chance to talk to very much.
That's great. We're always glad to get the word out, mate. So all I'd like to do before we go then is to say that on Thursday night this week, we're moving to Thursday night. Please don't forget, we're not on Friday. We've got Paul, our high-level financial insider, coming back for the April update. And as yet, we haven't got anything definite for the 26th, but we've got a couple of things in mind. And then on the 28th, we've got Mark Devlin talking about mind control in the music industry.
And don't forget, on Thursday, we are 7 till 9 rather than 8 till 10.
Yeah, absolutely. We're 7 till 9. We're the warm-up act for the Dr. Rock show from 9 till 11. So thank you very much for listening, everyone. Thank you so much to Ed for coming on and talking to us.
Thank you, Ed.
And
My pleasure.
Thank you, Jason, and thanks to all the listeners and all the great comments and questions from the chat room. Really sorry for those that we missed, but it was difficult to fit them all in. Thank you very much, and good night, everyone.
And your mom and two, we're about to go down, and you know just what to do. Cast your eyes to the skies and see what's there. Biological pollution, and they just don't care. Break your trance, your reliance, take your chance quick. Come on, people, it's time to wake up. Wake up! Everybody say, when you hear the call, you gotta get it on the way. Wake up! It's a code word. No matter where you say it, you know that you'll be heard. Now you sucker MPs who think you fly. It's gotta be a reason, and you know the reason why. Why you put on your airs and you act real cool. Got to realize that you're acting like a fool. We got a brain we can use free from their arrogance. We don't have to live in psychological trance. There's no trance, somnambulance, it's transformance. Come on, people, and tell me what's the word. Wake up! Give your face a slap. You don't have to live in this genocidal trap. Wake up! Everybody say, when you hear the call, you gotta get it underway. Dial L for love. Dial L for love. L for love? What the fuck? G for guitar! W-A-K-E, W-A-K-E, hear me people, W-A-K-E, for fuck's sake, wake up! Yeah, you pedophiles who think you fly. You're gonna get some justice and you ain't gonna hide. You think you own the court and you act real cool. Got to realize you're acting like fools. Rough justice says no justice, a remedy for me and you. Come on people, tell me what's the word. Wake up! Everybody say, when you hear the call, you gotta get it on the way. Wake up! It's a cold world. No matter where you say it, you know that you'll be heard. Wake up! Everybody say, we're gonna bring them down and we lock them all away. Wake up! It's a cold world. We're gonna warm it up when justice is unfurled. Wake up! Everybody scream. You know we can do it if you get into the sea. Wake up! Everybody scream. Believe that we can do it and we can live the dream.